All it takes is one story to change someone's whole perspective. You only need one YouTuber to say a game is good for you to actually find it amongst the sea of options present. And you only really need one reason to play said game. My thoughts and feelings about Star of Providence are about as chaotic as the bullet hells within it. In some ways, it's one of the worst experiences I've ever had, but in other ways, it's given me sensations and emotional responses I've only ever felt consuming some of the best media of my life. But let's put that on hold. Star of Providence, previously known as Monolith, came out a while back in 2017, but has had a resurgence due to its new publisher Big Mode, accompanied by a video by the man himself promoting it. In said video, he presents this game as a high-octane roguelike that's engaging when compared to the standard shooter available. I will also be mentioning a smaller video by a Mr. Staleman who gives a fairly positive analysis of the game. Before we begin, I need to acknowledge that this game and all the footage you will see from it is not exactly appealing to the eye. Just know this is intentional on the developer's part and all it takes is a bit of time to get used to. And another disclaimer, I know there is a distinction between roguelikes and roguelites, but I don't think this is a meaningful one in this context, and so for the rest of the video, I will only say roguelike when referring to either. That being said though, I will say outright that there is a massive problem with this category being used for the game. It's not a roguelike, and instead I would categorize it as a trial type game, similar to titles like Jump King, Chain Together, and Getting Over It. This is my primary critique of the game, but just know that to elaborate on this, I need to fully spoil everything. If you don't want that, or you want a game that is similar to the one Dunkey advertises, I'd recommend Tiny Rogues. It's a better roguelike than this in almost every way. Star of Providence, like many other things, has layers to it. The deeper you go into this video, the deeper the game will be spoiled, but also my evidence for why I think the things I do will be a lot stronger. The joyous moments in this game are heavily modified if you're spoiled on them, so if you have any feelings about playing this game in the future, I'd recommend just coming back later after sinking a few hours in. Though I will warn you that it's filled to the brim with problems and is easily the least inclusive game I have ever played. If you aren't confident in your reaction speed, hand-eye coordination, split-second decision-making, and overall mechanical skill in video games, do not play this. You will hate it and likely never finish it. Layer 1. The Monolith. We descend onto Layer 1 optimistic while we get our bearings. We play as a little spaceship exploring the ruins of a rundown facility, encountering room after room of hostile robots and creatures. We pick up various random perks and weapons, and to descend further into the facility, we have to best a gatekeeper at each level. This is definitely reminiscent of a certain genre of game. Let's talk mechanics. You can move as you would imagine, and of course you've got a dash, that's pretty standard stuff at this point. On each floor, you will find at least one shop, one upgrade terminal, and one gun depot. You have an infinite ammo pea shooter that you default to, but throughout your runs you will find a wide array of weapons to use. Any gun you find throughout the facility is subject to run out of ammo, though you will find collectibles that increase your max ammunition or replenish a percentage of what you're missing. The upgrade terminals allow you to select between 3 random perks that are selected from a bank of 18. You will find various items throughout your runs that upgrade a variety of stats, from extra health to more damage to cartridges that provide perk-like effects. Obviously, picking damage is always the correct option. However, to counteract that, picking damage has diminishing returns the more you choose it. As for danger, there's a lot of variety in room layouts, traps, and enemy variety. There's small guys that move quickly, things that explode on death, big guys that shoot big projectiles. All pretty intuitive stuff. Scrap that. The biggest danger in the game is the aspect ratio. I know that this is immediately off-putting to people, including myself. It's done intentionally though to reduce the amount of space the player has to move, forcing them to engage with the enemies on screen instead of shooting at them from as far as possible. Though this aspect ratio makes the game look a bit dated and unappealing, there's charm in the presentation and art style that just takes a bit of acclimation. This is followed by the music that fits the retro aesthetic the game is clearly going for, but I have some massive fucking problems that ruin the music for me that I'll get into later. Anyway, let's keep going with the mechanics. The biggest ones being the multiplier and your defensive options. The multiplier is the number at the top right of your screen that amplifies the amount of money you make based on how many enemies you've killed in a row without getting hit, maxing out at ×3. Getting hit reduces that multiplier by 1.0, so you're massively incentivized to avoid damage, else you'll be a very sad, very poor boy. If you don't get hit, the amount of money you earn will allow you to purchase heaps of goodies that you can use to move forward in the game. Hey wait, ignore that, don't look at that. So how do we avoid damage then? As stated before, we have our dash, but by default this doesn't have any invincibility attached to it, so using it becomes a bit niche. We have bombs that will slightly damage everything on screen, provide a variety of effects based on the bomb that you use, will open up hidden or barricaded rooms, and most importantly, clear most, if not all, projectiles on screen. Basically, this is your safety net when shit hits the fan. However, the most important defensive option you have to not get hit is getting good. Weaving through the many minefields the game throws at you. This is the greatest tool you have in Star of Providence and what you need to do to progress. Your ship's model would indicate that your hitbox is a lot larger than it actually is. It's not this ship, it's this tiny little green box that you need to maneuver to avoid taking damage. For some reason, the option to see your actual hitbox is hidden behind a setting. The play pattern for the first layer of the game is using the health that you have as your buffer of learning. You can take damage here and there without having to start again while you learn the various enemies and their attacks. You will eventually die, but hopefully over time, the attacks that did damage to you initially can more comfortably be dodged, and you can use that health you saved to learn enemies' attacks further into the facility. You will linearly get further and further until you reach the Overlord, the final boss of the game. First boss of the game. I'm about to get very, very, very negative. A lot of people really enjoyed this game, and I kind of did too, but no one else has described their experience similar to mine. Around this time in my playthrough, I honestly viewed the game as a 3 or 4 out of 10, for reasons I will elaborate a lot on. It later became higher, but to get to that, I need to be honest with how I felt about the game so you can understand how that perspective changed. Maybe you even played the game, but stopped because of reasons similar to mine, so hopefully after this shared experience, I can convince you to see the game from a new perspective. Before that though, I will warn we are about to enter Layer 2. If you are playing through the game and have just beaten Overlord or even Monolith, and are happy to continue the rest, do not watch this part and instead just come back. One of the best parts of this game is the story and drama it rewards you with for completing milestones, and I would hate to take that away from any prospective players. Layer 2, The Prisoner. Disempowerment versus empowerment. In video games specifically, this can be boiled down to, does the game make you feel weak or strong? There's obviously a balancing act being played in 99% of games. How strong versus how weak you are is a bit of a spectrum. What are the goals of the game? What is the player base we're aiming for, etc.? I'm not in a position to answer these questions, hence why I'm appealing to our intuitions with this very reductive statement. In a lot of dark fantasy Souls-like games, emphasis is put on pitting the player against harsh adversity and giving them tools to overcome obstacles through time and patience. Whereas, a lot of games in the roguelike genre focus on building the player gradually to become a semi-godlike entity that can decimate waves of enemies without having to press a button. If it's still kinda hard to understand this distinction, think about how broken Elden Ring would be if you dealt around 10 times the damage and moved at 100,000 times the speed. Or think about how grueling and repetitive Risk of Rain 2 would be if you needed to consciously keep track of enemy attack patterns and punish windows of opportunity because you did so little damage and moved at a fraction of the pace. I will clarify that obviously damage and movement speed are not the only ways to modulate the scale of disempowerment versus empowerment, but to me, they are the most obvious examples. And I will say, in case there's any confusion, that a game focused on either is not inherently better than the other. They are just different and better suited to different situations and contexts depending on the goals of the developer and desires of the player. Circling back to this game, I'm sure you can probably guess that I think it leans heavily on the disempowerment side of the spectrum, and I'm going to spend a lot of time complaining with examples soon. The one-sentence summary of Star of Providence is that you play as Murphy the mosquito that willingly chooses to fly into a biohazard pest control facility, in the hopes that you might become an exterminator. You will be fried, bludgeoned, eviscerated, incinerated, and absolutely pummeled into the pavement. Not only that, but you never actually can get that much stronger than your starting state. Sure, of course, I recognize that you do grow in power. Guns, perks, literal more damage, and knowledge, but when compared to other games like this, that feeling of strength is never really achieved. You always feel like the mosquito that's scared of being stomped into goo. So far, every aspect of this game has been done better in another title from a roguelike lens, and the sum of all the parts creates a painful, frustrating, and mediocre whole. That is a pretty strong statement. This is also contrary to another person's analysis, Mr. Staleman's. I disagree with a lot of what he says, and his final assessment of this game is a masterpiece, but I don't think he's dumb and stupid for thinking these things. I want to lay out why I disagree though. This isn't going to be a side-by-side of every point in his video or factor in this game, but I will bring up a few examples and compare to what I think is this game's big brother, Tiny Rogues. Both of these games feature top-down, shooter-style gameplay with bullet hell rooms and various generic roguelike elements. Tiny Rogues even reduces the playable space you have to move around, similar to Star of Providence. This is a little unfair since Tiny Rogues was released 5 years after Star of Providence, so I guess it's more of a little brother, but it still illustrates my point. I'm going to present the first boss for each game on the lowest difficulty for you guys to understand what I really mean when I say disempowerment versus empowerment. This isn't just some cherry-picked example, this is indicative of the gameplay experience for each game throughout an entire run. And maybe I'm just self-reporting my misunderstandings when I say this, but in my opinion, the game Dunkey advertised and presented ticked a lot of the boxes of empowerment, and I was extremely disappointed when instead I hung out with Murphy the fucking mosquito for over 100 hours. That's not hyperbole, by the way. To foreshadow the good that's about to come in a little bit, I will disclose that I have over 100 hours in the game now and have completed 2 bosses, one of which probably less than 100 people in the whole world have completed. But that will have to wait. I use all this to say that I speak from a little bit of authority as actually having properly finished the game to speak about its flaws as I'm about to. Let's start with some minor issues. In the Mr. Staleman video, he states that,
and the player upgrades. Oh god, the game has these stations your ship enters that give you game-altering upgrades and abilities.
The perks in this game are actual jokes. Out of the 18, yes I know it's technically 19, none of them seem particularly strong. Even something like a discount that would ordinarily be amazing in a roguelike is redundant as you always have an excessive amount of leftover money. To be honest, to improve the quality of life of this game, I'd wish that a lot of these perks were on by default, at least in the starting difficulty of the game. The enemy health bar scanner, iframes on your dash, and scrap runner being the primary examples. I don't think any of these would outright break any encounters and would only exist to streamline a lot of the frustrating bumps you come along while playing through this game. Well, how about guns? These are a bit better, but run into a different set of problems. You are more heavily incentivized to change weapons throughout your run. Scrapping your current gun for a new one rewards you with heaps of money, and with a perk, extra stats on top of that. Couple that with the ammunition mechanic that necessitates switching as your stores slowly diminish, and any gun, no matter how amazing and fun it might be, must eventually be thrown to the wayside. The side grades that go along with each gun also run into the perk problem of never being that exciting. Wow, my laser beam radiates shitty projectiles that tickle enemies they hit. Holy shit, I'm shooting 3 projectiles instead of 1, except the spread is so wide that only 1 projectile actually hits the thing I'm aiming at. Wow, my gun can shoot through walls. That's crazy. Oh wait, but it uses more ammo. My bad. I thought I'd be able to enjoy my time with this game for a bit. Sure, I understand how you can engineer combos with these keywords to create actually powerful weapons, but even with the strongest that I could come up with, they always seem to do the same general amount of damage to the actually difficult bosses in this game. Now, this is not by accident. The developers likely chose to make these 2 systems a lot less impactful than the standard roguelike for a fair reason. These guys put a lot of effort into crafting a set of bosses that have to be overcome. Monolith, the Warden, Database, the 4 trials and every boss in them, and finally, Chaos God with the Prisoner in its core. Every single attack these bosses deploy can reliably be dodged through reaction and proactive decision making. That is a true achievement in game design, and I promise you that this is actually true, though it definitely doesn't feel like it at times. If you get hit, it's because you made a mistake. After spending so much time making these pristine fights, it would feel anticlimactic for you to easily dispatch of them with your unholy combination of damage upgrades, game-breaking weapons, infinite health, and bottomless pit of items. So instead of the standard roguelike formula, they intentionally lowered the ceiling of power you can achieve and made a system that allows you to have a relatively consistent experience every run. This is actually pretty innovative and brave, I think. in theory. But there are two huge problems with this. One is that once you realize that they are artificially limiting the amount of power you can get, you'll realize things will never actually be that different from run to run. The roguelike fantasy of each run is fresh and exciting with endless possibilities is thrown out the window. You will start to see all your runs feel pretty much the same, and the only thing that changes is your own skill as you move through the game with more and more ease. Wait, but surely the guns remedy this problem, right? I'll address this later, I promise. And two, they did not succeed in their goal of limiting the player ceiling. Though 98% of the crap you find in this game is completely useless, 2% of it is game-breakingly strong. This solves the first problem, kind of. Once you receive these items, you actually feel like you're playing a roguelike, though a very middling one at best. But it undermines the goal they were trying to achieve in creating amazing, dramatic, cinematic, and difficult bosses. It also introduces another problem that is present in many roguelikes once you've played them for a while. Once you know what items and upgrades are good, especially when everything else is so bad, runs where you don't have these items become incredibly frustrating and prone to resets. Eventually, you will just be resetting until you receive these items in the first level or two. This destroys the pacing, immersion, and atmosphere of the game. In an effort to prevent everyone from just resetting for these items, I will keep my mouth mostly shut. However, the two examples that I have to mention are Contract and the strongest gun in the game. Contract on its face seems to be the standard risk versus reward present in these games. Double your damage but also receive double damage. Triple your current health but you can no longer heal, that sort of thing. Contract is a cartridge that reads, gain a powerful ally but you gain 20% less money. I mentioned it before, but in this game, even on the hardest difficulties, you will be flush with cash at almost all points in time. You would think that you only pick up an item like this once you've made enough money for the rest of your run, right? How powerful is this ally? The ally is a little man with a little gun that doesn't take any damage, locks onto targets and chases them like an assassin, and shoots whenever you shoot with damage that scales with your damage. Now I know that what I'm about to say might not seem like a lot to some players and might make other players come buckets, but just think about what it is that I'm saying. In effect, this makes Contract a 25% damage increase for little to nothing. Before we talk about the strongest gun in the game, I'm going to go on a little detour. Towards the end of last year, I ran into a problem. One of my favorite creators on YouTube stopped making videos, and there was very little content that resonated with me. In an effort to remedy this problem, I thought, why not do it myself? Learn a new skill and solve the problem by making videos that I can enjoy and watch for years to come. To keep myself consistent, I made a promise to myself that I would make at least one new video every month for a minimum of 2 years. I kept this promise for 4 months before coming to this game. Up to this point, I had a lot of confidence in my ability to complete games. Even getting an S rank for every level in Cuphead seemed fairly straightforward to me. In my opinion, completing what you're talking about should be the bedrock of any substantive analysis. Sure, you can still review something without completing it, this isn't illegal or anything, but I believe it diminishes the value of your thoughts and feelings a lot. When a restaurant is being reviewed to get a Michelin star, a guy doesn't come out and order one thing and base his critique off of that. It's an endeavor that takes multiple months, coming in multiple times, ordering close to every item on the menu, and forming their review based on different factors and criteria. I'm not out here trying to give games Michelin stars or anything. This is just something I do because I enjoy it, and it's how I express my love of the art form. But the other promise I made to myself was that I needed to complete any game I play before I review, analyze, critique it. These two promises were at massive odds with each other with this game, and had me second guessing everything I had done thus far and questioning what I actually valued. I work full time, from between 45 to 55 hours a week on average. Usually, my workflow has been to complete the game I want to talk about in roughly around a week, write the script, record voiceover, and finally edit in the remaining time I have left. I could not complete this game in 1 week. Sure, I killed Monolith, but I was hard stuck on Trial 3 specifically for days. And I really do mean hard stuck. No matter what game I've played or boss I've fought in my whole life, I've always had the tiny voice in the back of my head assuring me that it's just a matter of time and practice. Around 50 hours into this game, the sheer weight of mechanical adversity and pressure I faced ushered in a different, more disheartening voice. Maybe I'm just not good enough. I've heard this voice before in other aspects of my life, sure, but never once has it entered the safe haven of my video game experiences. This, coupled with the rising tension of the deadline looming in the back of my mind, broke me a little bit. It may seem silly and dramatic, like it's just a game, and by this point in my mind, not even a very good one, but this affected me more than I cared to admit. Each run I played was another attempt to prove the negative voice in my head wrong, but the loss after loss seemed to point at the opposite. The once charming music became a frustrating, repetitive jingle that I eventually just muted and replaced with my own. I would shut out everything and put 100% focus on every room, trying in vain to enter some flow state that would save me from my current predicament. That's not to say the music was bad or anything. I feel sorry for the producer tasked with creating something that is going to be listened to hundreds of times when we as players have the ability to just play our own music. I eventually did beat Trial 3, but I wasn't happy or relieved. I was shattered. It had been almost 2 weeks and I had only beaten Trial 3. All I wanted was to progress and beat this game, but then the final nail in the coffin came to sink me. Prior to making this video, the wiki was barely finished and there was not a lot of information surrounding the game or how to progress. Even the boss list was incomplete to give you some perspective for a game that's been out for 8 years now. This wouldn't be a problem if the game was less cryptic about what it wants from you, but of course, Klein's the Cat is useless and it was so hard to find any resource that actually demonstrated what the game wanted from you to unlock the 4th trial. All you get are these tiny little symbols. Now that I understand it, it kinda seems simple, but this is obviously with the power of hindsight. I'm curious if anyone else ran into the same roadblock as I did. In the game, there's a system called looping. You unlock this, completing a full run on hard mode after picking up a special cartridge in a secret room on the last floor. In my head, I thought looping would be some way of perpetually increasing your power through unlimited floors as a reward for beating the final boss of the game. This isn't what looping is. Looping is actually just New Game Plus, that goes all the way to New Game Plus 13. For those that don't know, New Game Plus is just what the name suggests, starting a completely fresh run, but the plus usually implying slightly harder difficulty, usually health and damage. This game deviates from that standard, and looping introduces new room layouts, new enemy attack patterns, new enemies, and new secret bosses. To unlock Trial 4, what you need to do is beat all of the secret bosses on hard mode. In practice, this means you have to go all the way up to loop 10, and what the game suggests for you to realize this is this shit. You can put a pin in this part of my experience and you will find the lowest point I ever reached with this game. From here, it's only up. On my many runs grinding to loop 10, everything slowly started to click into place. Ultra Instinct. The first of these big pieces was to stop thinking, turn my brain off in a sense. The amount of mental energy it was taking me to beat Trial 3 wasn't sustainable grinding the easy floors over and over again. And so to aid my boredom, I would just put on a podcast or video essay in the background while I reached the harder floors. In doing this, I uncovered that by this point, all the tiny micro decisions I had once been making consciously became ingrained in my muscle memory. In other words, I could beat almost the entire game without thinking. In fact, I actually played better with the unfocused approach rather than pouring everything into each floor. It might seem like weird advice, but if you're trying to complete this game, I would recommend just listening to a fucking audiobook while you play and slowly build up the muscle memory required to beat it. I thought that this wouldn't extend all the way to the harder fights, but funnily enough, this same approach worked wonders here too. For most of my first kills on certain bosses, I wasn't listening to the in-game music or my own hype tracks, it was long-form drama or video game analysis content. Bringing a gun to a sword fight. The second big puzzle piece that unlocked this game's potential is also a bit of a jab at the game. Star of Providence puts a lot of effort into showing you the many guns of this game, but I thought that they were the focus. But honestly, relying on a gun to carry you ends up being your downfall when you run out of ammunition on the lengthy, sometimes 8-phase boss fights. Both Dunkey and Mr. Staleman make a point of emphasizing the variety of weapons in the game, and this would be the counter-argument to me saying that each run feels similar. But the most efficient way to play is almost always scrapping any weapon you get, especially when you consider that if you forego receiving the guns and ammunition pickups, you will be rewarded with extra health and money. I don't think this is intentional by the developers like some secret they want you to figure out for yourself. It's a happy little accident. Once this initial thought came into my head, I thought I would try out the character I was intentionally avoiding out of the ridiculousness of it. There are 7 playable ships in this game. 6 of them all function somewhat similarly, but one stands out amongst them, the Overlord. You unlock this ship by beating a run on hard mode for the first time. The gimmick of this ship is that it only uses swords. Now some, including myself, might think that this sounds strange. Why would I opt into melee range with enemies? This seems like making the game unnecessarily difficult. I still believe this to be true, but the game lies to you. You're not really using a sword. The default weapon you use when you play as Overlord is a sword, but it's also a shield and a cannon. When you realize this becomes the way to play the game. There are 3 parts to this attack. The sword swing, which deals a good amount of damage in a short range. The cannon, which shoots a wide projectile at the point of your character's aim. And finally, but most importantly, the shield. This wipes all small to medium-sized projectiles in front of you as you attack. To be honest, even with just 2 out of the 3 of these things attached, I think Overlord would easily reign as the king of this game, and clearly the option to play as. But the fact that they get all 3 of these perks attached to their default weapon is almost game-breaking. Let's put it into perspective. Usually when things are balanced, there are trade-offs for certain advantages. You might assume that this playstyle is higher risk but higher reward or something. Like sure you can block projectiles, but the default gun is more consistent and higher damage or something. The sword not only is a gun in practice due to the cannon attack, not only is it easier to aim because the projectile is larger making it more consistent, it also deals significantly more damage. With a bit of finesse, you can hit enemies with both the sword and cannon attack, doubling your DPS. And this is all with the shield attached. I cannot in words demonstrate how much this shield changes everything. The game gives you so little in the way of decent defensive options that I would liken it to being dehydrated while roaming the desert. But this shield is like finding a true oasis. You can plan and strategize because so much of your mental RAM isn't just devoted to dodging the shittiest little projectiles in your immediate vicinity. And understanding. With these tools added, and the extra time and space I had to understand what was happening around me, knowledge and theory of what the game wanted from me started to grow. Attacks in this game can be split into 3 general categories. Tutorial style attacks. These are usually extremely simple to dodge and more so just give a baseline that is later added upon in numerous ways. Or they're used to give the player a false sense of security. Mean and predictive. These are the bread and butter. The enemy knows you want to dodge this attack in a particular way and will punish you for it, so less intuitive movement must be done. And finally, the spectacle. These attacks are more so just used to overwhelm the player and are usually fairly easy to dodge, it just doesn't look like it. The game also uses this style of attack to make certain fights have more gravity attached to them. A deep understanding of where to risk for extra damage, room layouts and pathing, what to prioritize and when in terms of item and upgrades, muscle memory maxed out. All of this is what I took with me going into the final parts of Star of Providence. Okay, we're about to go into the best part of this game. If you're someone that has played the game for a little bit but gave up for similar reasons as I may have earlier, hopefully sharing some of my thoughts and tips you can finish the game for yourself without seeing this last section. These moments are probably ones that I'll remember for the rest of my life. They were actually that impactful. You cannot have the same experience if it is spoiled for you. The final thing I will say is that after all that understanding I gained, a new perspective appeared for what this game actually is, despite how it's marketed and presented. Do not look at it as a roguelike. It's a challenge trial style game that may not be fun in the moment, but retroactively becomes fun after completing it. Through this lens, I think the game becomes significantly more fun, from a 3 or a 4 to an 8 out of 10. Here we go. Layer 3, Trial 5. There are 2 bosses/achievements in this game that have a 0.3% and 0.1% completion rate based on Steam's leaderboard tracker thingy. These are Decoherence and Eulogy respectively. Finding the total player base off of Steam and taking into account sales on Nintendo Switch, I believe Star of Providence to have about 100,000 players if I'm being charitable. And that's a lot, I'm not trying to downplay the game or anything. Therefore, that's around 300 players completed for Decoherence and 100 for Eulogy, which is even less people than views on my last YouTube video, to give some perspective. To give some more perspective, Melania, widely considered the hardest base game boss of Elden Ring, had a completion rate of around 35%. Based on that number, at least over 1 million people killed her, and that's being very conservative. In today's day and age, it's hard to find truly challenging things that don't have exploits or ways to cheapen said achievements. Ways you can cheese bosses or guides on how to make fights a cakewalk. I think this is the purpose of the trial type game. Jump King, chain together, getting over it. It's to create a lot of friction for the player in a day and age without much, and for said player to grow and overcome the challenge, making the journey getting there worth it. I personally am not as much a fan of decoherence because I think the journey there isn't necessarily hard as opposed to just tedious. You have to complete 12 looped runs and then make it to the final boss of loop 13 and win to complete this achievement. It's flashy, but for me it wasn't super worth the 100+ hour journey to get there. It probably doesn't help though that in my playthrough I got this one second. What I really want to talk about is the one thing that made this game worth it for me, Trial 5. To give some context for those that haven't done the trials, each one is a boss rush pitting you against an assortment of bosses that get progressively harder until you reach one of the final bosses. So for Trial 1 you fight Overlord, Trial 2 is the Machine, Trial 3 is the Monolith, and Trial 4 is Database. Each of these reflects the layers of the game, so each trial can be seen as you beating each layer with nothing but your skill. You don't have access to any meaningful upgrades, weapons, or 2% items. Chaos God is the hardest boss in the game bar none. It's not even close at all. To find it in game, you need to make it to something that is called the Temple, that you can only reach by having a close to max multiplier after killing the boss on floor 4 in a normal run. You then need to clear a large sprawling dungeon with 4 mini-bosses and many rooms that will tax your health and resources. Then you need to fight the Warden, which is an amazing 4-phase fight on its own. But then after killing the Warden, the Chaos God fight appears without any resource replenishment in between. Killing Chaos God on hard is the final thing you need to do to unlock Trial 5, and I did it. It was fucked up and brutal, but I felt I could finish the job and do it again in Trial 5. Grinder, Charlie, Fish, Nightmare, a super buffed Warden fight, and finally Chaos God. This is the set of bosses you must defeat to join the 100 others and receive that sweet, sweet gamer cred. Only there's a catch. Your health is cut in half. This is the final test. How good are you really? By this point in the game, at least 4 of the fights are nothing to you. They're just a really long Dark Souls run back to try your luck again at the big man at the end. Only Chaos God on hard mode was just a practice dummy. At the apex of the game, his attack patterns are more aggressive and all projectiles deal double damage instead of just some of them. There's a practice tool in this game, but the Chaos God inside it is puny and weak, so the only real practice you get is by dying over and over to the real thing. But finally, after every grueling attempt, you make it a little farther and a little farther until finally all the hours you've spent sharpening your muscle memory gives you the sweetest possible victory. And then, the game shows you the final boss. I think seeing the Arbiter after finally killing Chaos God might have been the first time I ever smiled playing this game. I actually couldn't believe the game in the 11th hour was doing some shit like this. Hiding a boss so special with no teaser just for those willing to put themselves through some truly sadistic shit. This fight is no joke. The Arbiter is like Sans holding the world together and keeping you from reaching the void to end it all. His final attack is literally a chain pulling you back to the start of your attempt. And of course, to get back to the Arbiter, you need to make it through the gauntlet again. Grinder, Charlie, Fish, Nightmare, Warden, and Chaos God every single time. Oh, and of course you can't practice the Arbiter in the practice tool until you beat him. This fight throws stuff at you have never experienced in anything up and until this point. The chains that limit your movement in such specific and alien ways are so hard to deal with. And of course, he couples this with literally a JoJo's reference. However, to be honest, this fight isn't that difficult compared to everything else. It's definitely in the top 3, but I still think Chaos God is harder. If I had to describe it, I'd say that it's more concentrated in its difficulty. It's a 3-phase fight, but the first is the hardest, whereas the 2 others are more victory laps filled with spectacle as a reward for all the work you've put in. The difficulty comes from doing it all in one run. Grinder, Charlie, Fish, Nightmare, the Warden, Chaos God, and finally, the Arbiter. This is the hardest thing I have ever done in a video game. It took me over 11 hours over multiple days attempting runs after my workday had finished. To be honest, considering all the practice I had fighting Chaos God and all the others in regular runs, that probably comes total to about 20 hours. But still, either way, nothing comes close to this achievement. After beating it, I didn't pop off, didn't cry, I was simply stunned for a good 30 seconds as a deep emptiness filled me. The void he was trying so hard to stop me from seeing. That bittersweet feeling you get when something you valued is truly finished. This is the one thing I hope you can gain some value from me sharing. You have to earn the fun of the game. It's not freely given, and it's hard to recommend this game when it is something that most people cannot finish. Star of Providence is just weird like that. There's not much else I can say. I hold no ill will toward the other people I mentioned in this video, and especially not the developers. I thoroughly enjoyed their game by the end of it. I want to give a big shout out to the wiki that's steadily growing and hopefully becomes a valuable resource for people as they play through this. And hopefully more people can make it to the end and complete Trial 5. Anyway, that's all from me. Thanks for watching. Peace and love.